So it's with a tinge of sadness that I have to inform you this is the final game that I'm going to bring you as a daily recap of the Chess World Cup 2023. Because this game was decisive. It was the first of two tie-break games between Pragg and Magnus, and then the second one was drawn, so the winner of this game is going to be the winner of your World Cup 23. And what a month it's been, what a tournament. I hope you've enjoyed these recaps. Do let me know in the comments, do like the video if you've done so, hugely appreciated. Now let's jump into this one and see what happens in this exciting climax. So Pragg kicks off with e4, and after e5, both knights developing, no surprises with bishop c4, the Italian game. Magnus goes knight f6, we get d3, bishop c5, and now the first mini surprise, Pragg goes pawn a4. Unusual to push the rook pawn so early in the game. You normally see something like c3 or castles. So what's Pragg up to? Well, trying to just unsettle Magnus. Now we get castles and pawn a5. Magnus decides he's going to grab some space. And now bishop e3 already signals some aggressive intentions from Pragg. Because Magnus captures, the pawn takes back. Why would Pragg voluntarily shatter his structure? Well, he's opened the f-file to attack, and with the pawn now moving to e3, you free up this diagonal for the queen to activate into the attack. So we get castles, knight b to d2, and knight e7 from Magnus. Great remaneuver, not going with rook e8. You know, you want that rook to stay with the defense of the pawn, and you have to start going for this central counterplay to play against Pragg's attack. So knight h4 starts the direct attack on the king. We get c6 and queen e1. Such a thematic attacking idea. d5 from Magnus, and the bishop just drops back. And you might wonder, why doesn't black take here and shatter this white structure? Well, a couple of reasons. One, you've just opened this bishop to laser down on your king, and two, black is a bit behind in development to start opening the center. So already, if you play a natural move like knight g6, white can swap, bring the queen, and you actually attack two pawns at once, because this one's pinned, and you can't defend both. White is significantly better. Just one sample line. So no takes from Magnus. He maintains this great center and goes queen d6, trying to develop, connect rooks, and adding some protection to this pawn. He also laterally covers this knight, because sometimes white's smashing there to open up the king. Very thematic exchange sack in the right position. So queen g3 played, carrying on the attack, and Magnus now spends some time correctly. Look at the clock times, but now knight h5, Magnus uses about 5 minutes. It's a critical position, he's under fire. Now this is a good move because he kicks this queen away. There were ideas even for white of d4, using the fact this pawn is pinned, you know, the queen's unprotected. And after this queen moves, he now goes g6, and Pragg just shows some inexperience here. He doesn't react to how the position has changed. He carries on launching the pieces forward, but actually the quieter move of dropping back the knight was the order of the day. But such a tough move to play. You're going in the opposite direction, you're blocking your rook. This knight's not coming into the game. But the point is, you pressure this pawn here, black goes f6, but you're just inducing weaknesses around the king. And after, say, bishop e6, d4 is a great move, opening up the game, trying to use the fact that this king is a tiny bit more loose, and these knights are kind of poised to spring into the attack. Is a bit better for white. So that was the way to go, but Pragg jumps in. Very understandable. He's pressuring the knight on e7. No takes, of course. I mean, the pawn is pinned, plus this one's loose. So Magnus chops off that attacking piece. We get pawn recaptures, and now a great move. Maybe Pragg underestimated this one. King g7, vitally important defensive move. You can't let white go f6 and squash your position. So what does Pragg do instead? Well, he just goes wrong and plays a bit too softly. So he plays king to h1, but rook a to e1 was the order of the day, because it fights against this next idea. After queen f6, offering the exchange, Pragg would like to go queen g4, but then in this line, after knight takes, you've got a problem, because you want to go e4, use this pin to the queen and everything like that, but knight e3 comes on the board, hitting both of these, and this is why the rook is better on e1. That move's not available for black. So if the rook's on e1, the knight can't go there, has to drop here to hit the queen like that. This is the whole point. This is why you can take and allow e4, because you've got this counter attack on the white queen here, but then there's queen d7. It's very, very subtle stuff. But you can invade with the queen, you hit the pawn. Black's a bit better apparently here, but white would be a bit better if the rook's on e1. Kind of deep stuff, but it was the way to go. King h1, now no queen g4 in good circumstances, so Pragg has to change, and this is a good endgame for Magnus. Why? Because Magnus has got the centre here, blunting the bishop, so Pragg strikes, we get captures from Magnus, not forced, but still a good way to go. Pawn recaptures, and Pragg has got 1, 2, 3 pawn islands. Magnus has only got the 2 pawn islands. He's slightly better, and rook a to d8 shows his small initiative here. So Pragg covers the knight with rook f2. The knight has to stay with the pawn. We get rook d4, pressuring that pawn. This rook doubles, saying, okay, if you take here, I'm going to chop and crash through here. Magnus doesn't want that, so instead he drops back his knight, covers this one, looks a bit passive, but he's got plans to untangle. We get pawn c3, kicks back this rook. Now rook e2, covering this pawn, preparing knight c4, rook e7 from Magnus, he covers his own weakness here, and now Pragg could already hop with knight c4, but he starts with some prophylaxis, bishop c2. He does take pressure off here, it's very cat and mouse, but he adds some cover here. Now knight d7 from Magnus, that pawn's not dropping anytime soon, so Magnus remaneuvers, knight c4, rook a8, looks a bit passive, but it's not permanent, b5's coming, and now Pragg here plays a very committal move. So you can just go knight d6 here, pressure the pawn, the knight can come, game goes on from here. What are the white plans here? Rook ef2 is one move the computer calls out. But what Pragg does is pawn to g4. Very, very committal, ambitious move, looking to clamp with g5. But look at how you weaken f4. Critical weakness now. Now the best move for black to exploit this is jump out with the knight, because if the pawn kicks on, you gain access here, and if you defend that pawn simply, well then knight c5, coming to e6 and f4. Nasty weakness Pragg has created. But what Magnus does is f6, a bit reactive. Is Pragg turning things around? Because now rook g2, knight h6 and g5, and white is now better according to the engines. So the pawn is taken, rook recaptures, knight f7 kicks back the rook, it drops to the second rank, and Magnus goes rook e6, trying to cover his weak points. Also the knight jumps. Rook d2 pressures this knight. Where is it going? Magnus under pressure here, but he finds a great defensive resource of rook to f6, and Pragg is starting to get down on time. So you've no time to take here, or your rook drops with check. So we see captures on f6, the knight recaptures, and now pawn b4 is a great move by Pragg, trying to get something going on the queen side. If this one ever drops like this, very, very dangerous. But Magnus here, cool as a cucumber, time on his clock, finds an excellent king remaneuver. He starts with king f8. We see king g2 in response and king e7, covering some key squares. No knight d6 jumps, really awesome stuff. And after a5, creating the bind on this pawn, rook h8 from Magnus. Horrible move to face in the time pressure. The rook is invading, pressuring this pawn. Here come the knight, here come the knights heading for this square. Knight g5 on the cards. Ugly, horrible position for white. We see rook e2, trying to cover weaknesses, anticipating this. Knight h5 from Magnus though, preparing to fork. The king steps back. Knight f4 anyway, rook d2 and rook h3. The invasion is horrendous. Pragg is down to barely seconds for these moves. He's getting 10 seconds back a move, but barely any time. And now the best move, according to the engine, is bishop d1. Hugely difficult move to find in time pressure. Still black is better. Moves like rook c3. But the idea is you cover some key attacking squares, but so much pressure still to come. But what Pragg does here is pawn a6, a desperate kind of move to shatter these pawns and create a weakness here on c6, which he now attacks. But Magnus starts invading. He could go knight g5 immediately, but he starts with rook c3. Rook c2, the best defensive move for Pragg. Still black is better, but Pragg goes knight a5. Pressuring this pawn, you're going to get a check. Looks great, but there's a big problem, and it starts with knight g5 threatening a fork. So the king sidesteps, rook sidesteps, trying to get a trade off. Now you get knight here check, king f1, and the rook sidesteps to a3. You've got huge problems. You're either going to win a piece or you're threatening mate. If you cover the mate threat, well, now the bishop drops. If you don't, if you check, king sidesteps, well, this is what we see in the game, then now you're just in a world of pain. How do you stop the mate? The knights are covering all three of the squares. There's just nothing to be done. I mean, say you could put your bishop here and the pawn's not going to capture it. Well, you can simply checkmate like this, rook blocks, and this is a mate on the board. So Pragg could do nothing. He's either getting mated or losing a piece. He resigns the game. Magnus then had white in game 2, but he just shut the game down. Nothing Pragg could do, and so Magnus Carlsen becomes the World Cup champion 2023. This now completes his resume. He's won everything, most things multiple times, but this one has eluded him. He's truly cemented himself with the GOAT status, in my opinion, right? Exceptional tournament. I am pleased for him to get this one in the crown. What a player we've seen in the last, decade and a half. Magnus Carlsen, take a bow. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed these recaps. Thanks very much for watching. Do hit like and subscribe to never miss a future one. And I'll get some games up in the coming days of some of the greatest games from this tournament. I think still so many I want to look back on. Anyway, I hope to see you again soon. Do check out the video on screen for another epic game of chess. And thanks very much for watching. See you soon.